Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a deeply emotional and personal tale about family, betrayal, and the legacy of a mother's love. Emily Parker thought she had everything, until the house she inherited from her late mother became the center of a bitter dispute. Her father and stepmother tried to take it from her, and Emily found herself caught in a battle that would forever change her family. Join us as we explore this journey of heartbreak, resilience, and self-discovery. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to start today's story. My name is Emily Parker, and I am 24 years old. I never imagined that one day I would find myself standing in the middle of a conflict so intense. A battle over my inheritance, my home, and my late mother's legacy. A conflict that pitted me against my father, Greg, and my stepmother, Michelle. But it wasn't just about property. It was about trust, respect, and the simple notion of family. The house I stood in was more than just a structure, it was my mother's dream. A Victorian gem nestled in a quiet corner of suburban Pennsylvania. My mother, Caroline, had poured her heart and soul into restoring this house. A crumbling wreck when she first bought it. Every nail driven into the walls, every piece of antique woodwork restored, was a testament to her unwavering determination and love for history. As a child, I had watched her transform it, never truly understanding how much it meant to her until after her death. When Mom passed away, she left this house to me. She placed it in a trust, ensuring that it would be mine, that I would protect it, and preserve it as a tribute to her and to our family's history. "This will be yours one day," she had told me softly, as her frail hand traced the intricate woodwork of the staircase. The same staircase she had lovingly restored. At the time, I was just 19, a college sophomore with dreams of following in her footsteps. Studying architectural preservation, I had promised her I would honor her wishes, not realizing that fulfilling that promise would soon tear my family apart. It wasn't long after her death that Greg met Michelle. I remember when he told me about her. Barely a year after Mom's funeral. At first, I thought it was just a rebound. But when Michelle and her daughter Olivia moved in, my doubts began to grow. Michelle was everything Mom was not: practical, modern, and dismissive of the house's history. She replaced Mom's old furniture with sleek, new pieces that seemed completely out of place in the Victorian setting. Olivia, her 16-year-old daughter, was distant, always on her phone, rarely bothering to interact with me. They made it clear from the start that I was the outsider in what had once been my home. At first, I tried to make it work. I had just graduated and found a job at a local preservation society. And I thought maybe this was what family was supposed to look like now. My grief over losing Mom was still fresh, and I clung to the idea of having some semblance of family, even if it was far from what I had imagined. But Greg changed. He became cold, distant, and began calling Mom's antiques that old junk. He talked about modernizing the rooms that she had carefully restored, suggesting they no longer fit with the times. When I objected, pointing out that Mom had always wanted the house to stay as it was, he would get frustrated and say, "Your mother is gone, Emily. The living need to come first." I felt as though my place in the house, our home, was slipping away. Despite all this, I stayed. I had the means to move out, find my own place, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. This house was Mom's legacy to me. It felt like walking away would be a betrayal. So I endured the subtle digs, the exclusion, and the growing discomfort. All I wanted was some acknowledgement of what was rightfully mine. But that was asking for too much. One morning, as I was drinking my coffee, I heard their voices. Greg and Michelle were preparing for a vacation, an exclusive trip to the Bahamas. I was not invited. The words they spoke as they prepared to leave stung like salt in a wound. "Maybe when we get back, Emily will have finally found her own place," Michelle said, dragging her designer suitcase toward the door. Greg nodded, agreeing without even looking at me. "We've been more than generous letting you stay here rent-free. Most parents would have kicked their adult children out by now." I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, my coffee cooling in my trembling hands. This wasn't just their house, it was mine too. This is my house, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom left it to me. Michelle rolled her eyes dramatically. Here we go again with that fantasy. She turned to Greg. Tell her, Frank. Greg's jaw tightened. Your mother wanted us all to live here as a family. Emily, not for you to lord it over us like some princess. I wasn't a princess. I was the daughter of a woman who had built something beautiful out of nothing. A legacy she had entrusted to me. But my father, the man who was supposed to stand by me, didn't seem to care anymore. He grabbed the handle of his suitcase and, without a word, walked out the door, leaving me standing there, my mother's memory fading with the sound of their car disappearing down the driveway. As I stood there, alone in the silence of the house, I felt the weight of everything Mom had fought for slipping away. I had endured their dismissive behavior for years, telling myself that it was what Mom would have wanted. She would have wanted us to stay together, to be a family. But what I was beginning to realize was that in trying to hold on to that dream, I had lost myself. And worse, I was losing the one thing that mattered most, my connection to Mom. I stared out the window, watching the car turn the corner. A mixture of hurt and anger washed over me. I had promised Mom I would preserve the house. But at what cost? I was no longer just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my mother's legacy, for the respect she deserved, and for the truth to be acknowledged. But as their car disappeared from view, a new determination began to take root. I wasn't going to let them take this from me. Not without a fight. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of dread and resolve. My father and Michelle were on their vacation, and I was left alone in the house, surrounded by the memories of my mother and the increasingly suffocating presence of the life they had built without me. I tried to keep busy, organizing old family photos, cleaning up the rooms that had been left undisturbed, but my mind was constantly pulled back to what I had overheard before they left. Their plans to have me removed from the house. It wasn't just the things they said on that fateful morning, it was the realization that Greg had been consulting with someone. Someone named Harold Brennan, a lawyer. The very idea of my father actively planning to destroy my inheritance was too much to bear. For years, I had tolerated his indifference, his dismissive attitude toward my place in the house. But this was betrayal on a level one hadn't imagined. Then, one afternoon, I received an email that would change everything. It was from Michelle, but it had been accidentally copied to my address. The email detailed their plans in a way that left me breathless. Frank, I've spoken with Harold. He says once we're back from vacation, we can move forward with having Emily legally removed from the house. He thinks her claim about Caroline's wishes won't hold up without the original trust documents. My heart sank. Harold? The lawyer they were consulting with? This couldn't be happening. How had they managed to get so far? My hands trembled as I read the email over and over, each time trying to process what it meant. The trust documents, the very foundation of my claim, were being called into question. And without them, without the original papers, my word would mean nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother, about the trust she had so carefully set up, and about how my father and Michelle were working to undermine it. My mother had wanted this house to be a sanctuary for me, a place where I could honor her work and legacy. But now it felt like a battleground. I knew what I had to do. I had to find the original trust documents. They had to be somewhere. My mother had always been meticulous with her paperwork, and I knew that if I could find the original documents, I could prove my claim, expose my father's lies, and protect my inheritance. The next morning, I ventured into my father's office, a room that had once belonged to my mother. It had been transformed since her death, now stripped of its warmth and filled with Michelle's cold, corporate touch. It was a sterile space, lacking the character that had once made it a reflection of my mother's soul. The sight of it made me feel like an intruder, despite the fact that I was the rightful owner of the house. I started with the desk drawers, office supplies, bills, a few family photos that had been carefully arranged, photos with me nowhere to be found. It was as though they were erasing me from the story of this house. I moved on to the filing cabinet, methodically working through each folder labeled with Michelle's precise handwriting. Then, at the back of the bottom drawer, I found it, a thick manila envelope marked, Wells House Legal. I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling as I spread the contents across the desk. Inside were copies of documents I recognized immediately, my mother's trust agreement, naming me as the beneficiary and my father as a lifetime tenant, with specific conditions that he could not interfere with my rights. But there were also newer papers, ones I had never seen before. These were letters from Harold Brennan, a real estate attorney, discussing ways to invalidate the trust and establish clear ownership of the property. A yellow sticky note in my father's handwriting read, "Original trust documents in Caroline's old lockbox. Sam might have the key." The cold realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They were looking for the original trust documents, trying to destroy them. Without those papers, it would be my word against my father's, and I feared I would lose. This wasn't just about property, it was about the legacy my mother had entrusted to me. And they were willing to tear it apart. I was shaken, but I couldn't stop now. My father wasn't just forgetting my ownership, he was actively plotting to take what was mine. I gathered the documents, the proof of their betrayal, and made my way back to my room. As I opened the back of my closet and retrieved my mother's fireproof box, I realized just how much this moment meant. The box was where Mom had always said the original trust documents should be kept. It had been her final gift to me, a safeguard for when I would need it most. With a deep breath, I opened it, and there, just as my mother had promised, was the original trust agreement, along with a sealed envelope marked, "In case of disputes." My heart raced as I opened the letter, my mother's familiar handwriting comforting me even in this moment of profound uncertainty. The letter confirmed what I already knew. My mother had anticipated this. She had prepared for the possibility that Greg might try to take the house from me. Her letter gave me the strength to keep going. This fight wasn't just for the house, it was for everything my mother had worked for, everything she had believed in, and I would not let her legacy slip away. The weight of the discovery settled heavily on my chest. My mother had prepared for this, but I hadn't. I hadn't imagined my father would betray me in such a way, let alone involve Michelle and the lawyer, Harold Brennan. But the truth was undeniable. They were conspiring to take what was mine, to erase everything my mother had worked for. The original trust documents in my hands were the key to protecting my mother's legacy. But even with this proof, I knew it wouldn't be easy. I could feel the weight of the decision ahead of me, one that would irrevocably alter my relationship with my father, the man who had raised me, who had promised my mother he would look after me. Yet, here I was, preparing to take legal action against him, and in doing so, sever ties that could never be repaired. I made the call. Eliza Montgomery, the trust administrator my mother had appointed, answered on the first ring. She was a woman in her 60s, sharp-eyed and no nonsense, and I trusted her completely. I explained the situation, my voice trembling as I recounted my father's betrayal, the evidence I had uncovered. Eliza's calmness was a contrast to the turmoil inside me. She assured me that we could take legal action to enforce the trust. But she also warned me that this process could get ugly, fast. You need to be prepared for the consequences, Emily, Eliza said, her voice steady. This will be a difficult road, and your father isn't going to back down easily. I had no illusions about the emotional cost. I knew that by pursuing this, I was risking everything, my relationship with my father, any hope for reconciliation, and even the fragile family dynamic that had once existed. But what choice did I have? My mother's wishes had been clear, and it was my responsibility to uphold them. Over the next few days, Eliza and I worked through the legal process. She drafted a formal letter outlining my father's obligations under the trust, requesting a meeting with him upon his return from vacation. It was a simple letter, but it carried the weight of my mother's intentions, and I hoped it would be enough to remind my father of his commitments. As I stood in the quiet of the house, staring at the letter, I wondered if my father would even care. Would he acknowledge the trust? Or would he continue down this path of deception, ignoring the promises he had made to my mother? The day they were due to return, I could hardly breathe. I had vacated the house temporarily, as Eliza had advised, to avoid any direct confrontation. I stood across the street, watching as their taxi pulled up to the house. Greg stepped out first, looking relaxed, as if nothing had changed. But his expression faltered as he saw the official vehicles, the sheriff's deputy, Eliza, and the court representative, all standing by, waiting for him. I saw Michelle, too, her designer sunglasses hiding her shock. She wasn't prepared for this. And Olivia, my stepsister, kept her distance, standing slightly apart from the others. I caught her eye across the street, and for a brief moment, she gave me a small nod, one that made my heart ache. The sheriff's deputy stepped forward, officially serving them with the court order. My father's face hardened, his hand reaching for the papers as if trying to deny what he was seeing. Michelle flailed her arms in disbelief, shouting at the officials, but there was no escaping the truth. Eliza remained calm, pointing to specific sections of the paperwork, while the court representative took notes. The reality of their situation set in. My father's face turned from shock to a deep red, his anger boiling over. But when he saw the final document, the letter from my mother, explaining the true origin of the house funds and the family inheritance, it was as though the ground had shifted beneath him. He sank onto one of the suitcases, his facade of righteous indignation crumbling into stunned defeat. It wasn't just the house that he had lost. It was everything, the trust he had broken, the promises he had forgotten. And for the first time, I realized that he understood the depth of his mistake. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel victorious. Instead, a profound sadness washed over me. This wasn't the way I had imagined this moment. There would be no family reunion, no reconciliation. The warmth of the home that had once been a symbol of our family was gone, replaced by the harsh reality of legal battles and broken relationships. The sheriff's deputy handed my father the final documents, and I watched him, his face pale and defeated. Michelle didn't say a word. Her anger now turned inward. Olivia, though, didn't take her eyes off me. There was something in her gaze, something like regret, or perhaps understanding. This was not a victory. It was the end of something, a painful, necessary end. I had fought for what was rightfully mine, but the cost was higher than I had ever anticipated. My mother's legacy had been protected. But at what price? I couldn't answer that yet. Not fully. As I watched them leave, the weight of what I had done settled on me. There was no turning back now. This was my mother's house, her legacy, and I would do everything in my power to preserve it. But in doing so, I had severed the last ties to a family that no longer existed. As time passed, the house began to feel like mine again. Every corner that had once been touched by my mother's hands, every molding, every restored window, now carried her spirit even more profoundly. But it also carried the weight of the choices I had made. The pain of what had been lost still lingered, especially when I thought about my father and the woman he had chosen over the memory of my mother. In the weeks following their eviction, I focused on rebuilding, not just the house, but my own sense of self. My father and Michelle had found a new place, and I rarely heard from them. The silence was deafening, but it was a silence I had come to expect. I had learned that some relationships, no matter how deeply rooted, cannot survive betrayal. It wasn't until I received a message from Olivia, my stepsister, that things began to shift. She had been caught in the middle of it all, just as I had once been. She asked if she could visit the house, and I agreed. The first time she stepped through the door, she seemed different, her eyes softened, her attitude less defensive. In that moment, I realized that despite everything, she was still a part of me, a thread that tied me to a family I never truly wanted to let go of. My mother's legacy, however, was not just about the house. It was about perseverance, about love, and about making choices even when they are hard. I realized that preserving her memory was about more than keeping the house intact. It was about learning to live with the lessons she had taught me. Thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more life stories, where we share real-life experiences, the struggles we face, and the lessons we learn along the way.